No industry changes faster than modern marketing. Great marketers need an edge. Great marketers need to be brave. The Brave Marketer podcast provides an opportunity for each guest to share a story where they exhibited bravery by taking a risk that made a dramatic impact in the market. Our guests are marketers from top brands and agencies who share the exact strategies and tactics they used in their brave marketing moment. We then dive deep into topics like ethical advertising, consumer privacy, crypto marketing, brand safety, and navigating a future without third-party cookies. Hosted by Brave Software and me, Donnie Devoren, head of sales at Brave. Together, we'll get a backstage view of the brave marketing moments and creative mindset work that's shaping today's most influential brands. You're listening to a new episode of the Brave Marketer podcast, and this one features Andra Zaharia, Cybersecurity Content Marketer. Andra helps cybersecurity companies crush clichés with content that breeds fans and fuels growth. She brings over a decade of digital marketing experience focused on startups and scaleups, half of which she spent in the cybersecurity industry, acting as a bridge between technical pros and business leaders. When she's not fighting InfoSec marketing BS, she talks to high performers about their decision-making process for her own podcast called How Do You Know? And before we hop into today's episode, we want to highlight our Brave Pick of the Week. And we choose a brand that's run a campaign with us. And this week we're choosing NortonLifeLock. NortonLifeLock is a company that helps keep users safe online. It's very apropos with our online privacy theme, with device security, a VPN for online privacy, and identity theft protection all in one. They ran a push notification ad campaign on Brave to raise awareness about their company and their products in a privacy respecting way. And now for today's episode of the Brave Marketer. Hi, Andra. Nice to have you on the Brave Marketer podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm so good. I'm so pumped for this, especially because I've been using and following Brave for such a long time. And I love the way that you show up for the community and the way that you talk about everything that you do, and especially the things that you do. And I often reference Brave as an example of here's how to do InfoSec comms right. And here's how to put a great product forward. So I'm very psyched to be here.
Oh, good. Well, we're excited to have you as well. So why don't we just start with telling us what's the most exciting thing you're working on right now?
This is actually the first time I'm talking publicly about it. Not that I'm some kind of superstar, but this is actually the first time I get to talk about my new kind of pet project, which will be a new podcast that's focused on empathy. It's going to be called Cyber Empathy. It's going to be all about getting people in tune with one another and showing that human quality that's so pervasive and so important to cybersecurity and privacy and everything in between. So I'm currently recording. It's not live yet, but I'm very excited about it because it gives me a chance to not only talk about the things that I care deeply about, but also I'm going to finally get to talk to a lot of people that I've been following in this space for over 5 years and getting them in a conversation around those things that we care deeply about.
Good. And as background, what are your passions? What are you really excited about in the sense of this podcast? You want to talk about empathy and you want to talk about the things that get you rallied up during the day. What are those things?
So those things sit at the intersection of technology and psychology and human nature. Because the more I studied cybersecurity and the core concept, so I could put out content that helps companies put their best work forward, and it also helps readers in the community to advance their own knowledge and advance their own skill. The more I did this, the more I realized that fundamentally it's all about human nature and getting people to pay attention, because we as humans, we're not very good at doing proactive stuff, and we can see this all around us. So actually triggering some sort of change, whether it's in mindset or behavior or habits or anything, requires that deep understanding of what makes humans actually respond and actually feel motivated to act for change. So what gets me excited in the morning and what gets me going and what keeps me pouring all of this energy into this field It's a mix of wanting to pass on what I understand about cybersecurity and how it's changed my perspective and how it's made my life easier and how it helps me navigate through this hyper complex world that we live in, and pass that on to people so they can make better decisions for themselves.
And you mentioned things that motivate the change. What do you think really motivates people to make these changes?
Well, it's two things. From what I've seen, from what I've observed in my own behavior, it's either moving away from pain. I've seen people change their behavior when something dramatic or truly painful happens to them, whether this is going through a cyber attack or falling victim to a phishing scam or whatever it is. That's usually prompts the fastest change and the fastest reaction. And then there's moving towards something that has a positive effect on their lives. And that's a bit harder to create because we're now so used to just instant gratification that it's difficult to get people to consider the long-term implications of their actions. But I think that there's a lot of work around self-awareness that people are doing. I don't want to generalize, but we've probably all noticed this in the people around us, whether they're our colleagues or friends or partners or bosses or whoever they are. We've noticed that there's been this moment where we had to pause and sit with ourselves for a longer while than we would have habitually. So I think that what gets people to change are these two things. And I hope that what we're doing in cybersecurity helps people do this from a place of, let's say, optimism and not from a place of despair or a moment where they feel they have an emergency situation that they need to deal with.
It's almost like there's a line, and like below the line is all the negative stuff and the problems that people have either with cybersecurity or could be with their own lives. And then above the line is more the opportunistic, and people are just fine, but they want to do better or they want to have better cybersecurity. And it's interesting that it's like you talk about like down here, it's like fear and you just want to get to like normal. And then above here, you want to excel, you want to be better. And I think that like there's so many correlations to that. I think even about like meditation. I think that people sometimes meditate because they're trying to heal something, because they're in so much either physical or mental pain and they would just want to get back to regular, or they say they're regular, but they want to get to a more place of zen or bliss or whatever it is, and they want to get above the line. And I think that like that concept of the duality of wanting to make a change can apply to almost everything in life, everything in business, everything with relationships that you have.
This is what we're here for.
Exactly. On these podcasts, we can ask dry questions or we can just take it a step further. We can go deeper. So the Brave Marketer podcast is all about that moment in time where you took a risk. And that risk may have been because of something negative that was happening and you want to get back to that normal place, or you wanted to just go above and beyond. So Andra, for our audience, can you tell us about your brave marketing moment that you decided to choose for this podcast?
This moment happened not too long ago. It actually happened last year when I decided to fully commit to the industry. When I started freelancing almost 3 years ago, I had other customers that were in the tech space, but not necessarily focused on cybersecurity. So I had this internal conflict where I knew that to do my best work, I had to stay niched. But at the same time, there was that fear of not having enough clients to begin with. And also the imposter syndrome issue that creeps up every now and then because I don't come from a tech background. So I had this moment where I decided that I would commit fully to the industry and that I'm going to exclusively dedicate my work and also some of my personal projects to the space. But I wanted to carve out a mission for myself, not just be someone who creates content in cybersecurity, but actually have a mission that aligns with my principles and what I want to contribute to this space and this community. So that's when I decided that by looking at the work that I was doing and the kind of conversations I had in the past years with clients and former employers and teammates, I realized that I actually was advocating for using a certain type of language, for breaking down stereotypes, for not using clichés. So I decided that would be my mission, that I would take on publicly that mission of fighting against clichés and fighting against myths and just things that keep being rehashed over and over again in the industry without a basis. And it just creates the sort of communication that just goes right, not through people, but around them, because they don't resonate with those things. Things like military grade security and unhackable and all sorts of things that lack nuance and lack empathy, since we were talking about that earlier. Since I did that, the effect was, honestly, it was a bit surprising to me as well, because I started striking up conversations with people who believe in the same things from very different geographies, from the US to Australia, from very different niches as well. I started to see that people are interested, like, okay, what do you mean by these cliches? What do they look like? What do they sound like? Why aren't they true? So it was a moment of bravery for me, because I had to overcome that imposter syndrome, and I had to trust myself that I knew what I was doing, that I could put my best work forward, and that I could continue with my mission, specifically in the cybersecurity space. So I'm really glad that I did it. And that was actually inspired by a course that I did and a fellow marketer who is quite brave himself. He was always an example for me. His name is Louis Grenier, and he does the Everyone Hates Marketers podcast. And he's very good at helping other marketers overcome their self-limiting beliefs, which is what his contribution to my story was.
Got it. So when you think about marketing as a whole, what do you think are the biggest threats or challenges that we face as an industry?
Ooh, for me, it's one thing, especially because I focus a lot exclusively actually on organic growth. I think that it's over-reliance on advertising and the entire model that's behind that. I think that over-reliance on advertising makes things very transactional. And as technology evolves, and hopefully this entire push for stronger privacy, for a different model of capturing and retaining attention that's not as aggressive, as intrusive, as manipulative, let's be honest. As these kind of changes and as the compound effect of all of these efforts pile up, to me, I think that we're going to be in a place where marketers won't have this easy, instant gratification way out with their work. So they're going to have to figure out what does marketing look like in a cookieless future, since we're talking about that. And I see that many marketers are already dealing with this, because so many people use ad blockers. And of course, if you use Brave, you're going to have it built in, and it's going to make your life so much easier. So what does it look like when people stop paying attention? How do you actually create that human connection and not just do everything in a way that feels too transactional, too cold, and too devoid of that human touch that we all crave for? That is the biggest challenge. Not paying attention to what's sustainable and to what people need in the long run, because I really believe in that.
So that's our biggest threat that we're facing right now. And what about the biggest opportunity that you think marketers have right now?
Oh, that's something that I'm super keen on talking about and connecting on. I think that building a sustainable way to achieve growth, a sustainable growth system, that is the biggest opportunity that we have. I'm very much against hypergrowth and against the hustle and everything that goes with that, which I saw a lot in the startup world, and I keep seeing because I work a lot with startups. But I also see that there's this much stronger interest in actually building a sustainable growth engine that works and that gets people to follow a brand and connect with a brand on what I'd call decentralized channels, things like RSS and email, and the old school stuff that's very reliable and stable and that gives you direct access to people and the privilege of capturing their time and attention and energy. So to me, I think, especially in the B2B space, there's this opportunity to talk to people like they are people, and there are people behind the company that's creating the product or the service. And this is especially important in cybersecurity and privacy, where language can be stark and things are very abstract and they're very devoid of feeling sometimes. So what I think the opportunity here is to bring out the human value that's behind a company, the human value of each team member and their stories, and help those stories, just put them into the spotlight and through them connect people through empathy, through shared beliefs, and things that don't really change. I think that so much of advertising and so much of marketing is focused on trends. It's focused on the latest channels and things like that. But the companies who engineer and actually build sustainable growth focus on the things that don't change, things that are inherent to human nature, principles that have worked forever, things that rely on quality, and then actually doing good by your promise as a company. So that's what I hope to see more of. I'm glad that I see more of that, even in the cybersecurity space, in the privacy space, and in many other areas as well. And I hope that people take that path, because I've seen it be a rewarding trajectory for everyone involved, from CEOs to everyone else in the team, for customers as well.
Got it. As you talk about actual people and online privacy, what do you think consumers should do when they consider their own online privacy? And maybe are there any quick action steps that they can take to protect themselves a bit more?
So first of all, and I think that this is very important, is for them to find someone they trust. Whether it's someone in the family or someone among their friends or someone online on YouTube or whatever channel that they use, they should find someone they trust, because that moment of trust, that relationship, is the basis for them to open up to doing things that they might not be comfortable with. Because having trust in someone else also builds trust in yourself that you can do these things and that they're not a different monster that you're unable to tackle. And once you have that, you're much more receptive to information. And speaking of a few very small things that have a big impact, it's things like turning on two-factor authentication for your main accounts, which can save you from a world of trouble. It's things like using a password manager. It's things like using a secure browser that will filter out a bunch of things from you, for you, things that happen in the background and that you don't have access to if you don't have the tech know-how to get there. And I really believe in embedded privacy and embedded security. I think that Brave is doing, for example, a very good job at doing that, at embedding all of these things into the product itself, so that people don't have to jump through hoops to get them and to enjoy these things that they think they have on other platforms and that they don't. But it's also about having access to these things. And that's why I think it's so important to find those people who we really trust, because they give us access to, they open up our views to various products and solutions and behaviors and examples and stories. But without having that initial connection that's marked by trust, none of this can happen, because honestly, we have so much to deal with right now, every single one of us, that it's very difficult to find the mind space and the energy for it. But if you have that human connection, you suddenly find the resources for it.
Got it. Good. This has been really great, and we're happy to have you on. My last question for you is, if you hadn't done X, you wouldn't be here today. What is that X for you?
This is going to sound really dorky, but if I hadn't started a personal blog back in 2008, I wouldn't be here today. That was the trigger for, I guess, my entire career, but my entire journey as a human, not just as a professional. And as silly as that sounds, starting a blog and then becoming part of the local online community and then connecting with the international one, that's what brought me here today. It put me in direct contact with technology in a way that felt very personal to me, because I had to learn things like dealing with WordPress and all sorts of things. And when I realized that, hey, I could do this, and this is a great way to broaden my views and to experiment with ideas and share them with the world. That's where it all happened.
And how can people find you online? Because we know that you're not on Facebook and you're not on Instagram, but you are on LinkedIn and you are on Twitter. So how can people connect with you there?
Yes, you can just use my name, Andra Zaharia, and just a quick search away. You can find me. My DMs are open. I would love to talk to people and help out in any kind of advice, or just wondering about what to use and what to do. I'm here for you. And I hope to be, that person that you can trust and to go to someone when you need to go to someone for advice. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about these things that I really loved and that I really appreciate. I love that you're doing this podcast, and I love that you're talking about marketing openly in an industry that doesn't really like marketers. Neither cybersecurity nor privacy loves marketing because it comes with all of that baggage. But getting clarity and seeing that people are doing things differently, I think, is an important story to tell.
Yeah, you've been a great guest and we appreciate it. And really, this podcast is for other marketers to learn from people like you on different subjects. And we ran deep into online privacy today, and hopefully the marketers that are listening to this can pick up some tools of the trade. So thank you, Andra, for coming on. And until next week, thank you.
Thank you too, Donnie. This has been a blast.
Well, thanks for listening to another episode of Brave Marketer. Hopefully you have some key things to take away. Andra talked about creating content that resonates with users by bringing out the human values behind the company and the products. She talked about the importance of connecting with users with empathy and shared beliefs, and actual tactics and tips on protect your own privacy immediately. She talked about two-factor authentication. She talked about using a password manager. So anyway, if you liked what you heard today and found it valuable, it'd be super helpful if you took 1 minute to leave us a short review in Apple Podcasts. Every review counts in helping us get to our shows in more ears. On a final note, if you have a brand, product, or service that you'd like to get in front of Brave's 34 million users, please email us at adsales@brave.com and let us know you're a podcast listener to unlock one of two perks. If your budget is under $10,000 a month, we will bump you up to the top of our self-serve waiting list. Or if your budget is $10,000 or over a month, you'll qualify for a 25% podcast listener discount. Again, email us at adsales@brave.com. And finally, music credit goes to my older brother, Ari Devorin. He wrote all the intro and outro music that you're listening to both in season 1 and season 2. We're greatly appreciative of his musical talents. So until next week, thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you then.